What's the most embarrassing thing a teacher has ever done to you in class? My mother-in-law, Eleanor, thought I was broken that day. And to be fair, I looked the part. I was sitting in the overstuffed armchair in the nursery, my newborn son, Leo, asleep in my arms. The room was painted a soft, hopeful yellow, but the air felt thick and gray, heavy with the cloying scent of the lilies she had brought. They were funereal, not celebratory. I was 3 weeks postpartum, a ghost haunting my own home, a landscape of exhaustion and a deep, gnawing anxiety that felt both alien and horribly familiar. She saw the dark circles under my eyes, the slight tremor in my hands, the way I flinched when the doorbell rang. She saw a relapsed addict, a failed mother, a perfect victim. She was right about the victim part. She was wrong about everything else. "You look tired, dear," she said, her voice a silken web. She stood in the doorway, a porcelain statue of maternal concern, dressed in a severe navy blue suit for her grandson's christening. It was her grand triumph, the day she would officially welcome her legacy into the world and quietly, finally, excise me. "Let me take him. You should rest before the guests arrive. You need your strength." She reached for Leo, her fingers adorned with heavy, cold rings. I flinched, pulling him closer. Her smile didn't falter, but a flicker of irritation crossed her eyes, as brief and sharp as a shard of glass. "I'm fine," I managed, my voice a dry rasp, "just tired." It was the script we had been following for weeks. I was the fragile new mother, overwhelmed and slipping back into old, destructive patterns. She was the steady, supportive matriarch, holding the family together. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting, and she was its architect. She had been building this prison for me since the day her son, David, had proposed. She never wanted me. I was a stain on her perfect family portrait, a girl with a history, a recovering alcoholic from a family with no name and no money. A son was an heir, and heirs needed immaculate mothers. "Of course you are," she cooed, gliding into the room. She didn't sit, but perched on the edge of the ottoman, leaning in, her perfume a suffocating cloud of jasmine and condescension. "But we all need help sometimes. David is so worried. We all are." She placed a heavy file folder on the side table next to me. The paper was thick, creamy, expensive. It looked like a death certificate. "This is help, Sarah. This is the best way forward. For everyone, especially for Leo." I stared at the folder, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I knew, with a sudden, chilling certainty, what it was. It was the culmination of her campaign. The months of whispers to David about my instability, the constant undermining of my parenting, the special herbal tea she insisted I drink every afternoon, the one that left me groggy, confused, and filled with a despair so profound I had started to believe her narrative. I had started to believe I was losing my mind. But a week ago, a small moment of clarity had pierced the fog. I had spilled a cup of her tea on a white napkin, and as the stain dried, a faint oily residue had remained, something that smelled vaguely chemical. A seed of suspicion, planted in the fertile ground of her years of subtle cruelty, had finally taken root. "What is this, Eleanor?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I had to keep her talking. I had to play the part just a little longer. My Uncle Mark, a man who had seen me through the worst of my addiction and celebrated every day of my recovery, was in the living room with David. He had arrived early, a surprise. He thought he was just here for a christening. He had no idea he was about to become my only witness. "It's a formality, darling," she said, her voice dropping into a confidential, conspiratorial tone. "It's an agreement for Leo's sake. It grants David and me temporary guardianship, just until you're feeling, well, until you're feeling more yourself again. We have a wonderful facility for you. Quiet, private, the best care. Dr. Albright said he'd be happy to admit you this afternoon. He's already seen your file." Dr. Albright. A name I didn't know. A professional she had undoubtedly deceived, feeding him a curated history of my fragility. I opened the folder. The legal language was dense, but the words jumped out at me, stark and brutal. "Voluntary relinquishment of parental rights. Incapacity. Mental instability." It wasn't temporary. It was permanent. She was trying to erase me. My hand started to shake, a real tremor this time, born not of weakness, but of a cold, furious rage that would burning away the fog. She mistook it for a breakdown. There, dear," she said, patting my arm. Her touch was reptilian. "Don't distress yourself. It's for the best. You're not well. You know you're not. You've been drinking again, haven't you? I can smell it. David knows. He's heartbroken, but he understands. He knows you can't be trusted with a child." She leaned in closer, her voice a venomous hiss. "You were never strong enough for this family, for my son, for my grandson. I am saving him from you." That was it, the inciting betrayal. The moment the mask didn't just slip, it shattered. She wasn't just a cruel mother-in-law. She was a monster, a methodical predator who had been hunting me for years. And in her arrogance, she believed she had already won. She believed I was too sedated, too broken to fight back. But she didn't know about the spilled spilled tea. She didn't know that for the past 3 days I had been pouring her special brew down the sink and drinking plain water instead. And she didn't know that my phone was nestled in the folds of Leo's blanket, its microphone recording every single venomous word that dripped from her lips. The final hidden advantage, her confession poured out of her then, a torrent of long simmering hatred. She gloated, her eyes gleaming with triumph. "I knew you weren't right for David from the start," she began, her voice low and smug. "A little charity case from the wrong side of the tracks, with a history that would make a sailor blush. But David, he has his father's soft heart. He saw a project, a bird with a broken wing. I saw a parasite." She looked at Leo, sleeping peacefully in my arms, and a strange, possessive hunger filled her gaze. "But you did manage one thing. You produced an heir, a fine, healthy boy, a Blackwood. He deserves a proper mother, Sarah, not a drunk who can barely keep herself together." I stared at her, my mind a maelstrom of shock and a terrifying, clarifying rage. The fogginess, the depression, the crushing fatigue that had plagued me for months. It wasn't just postpartum hormones, it was her. It had always been her. "The tea," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. She actually laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "Oh, the tea! So clever, wasn't it? Just a little something to help you relax. A traditional blend of herbs, I told you. And you, so trusting. You drank every last drop. It was so easy to convince everyone you were falling apart." A few whispered words to David, a concerned call to your own mother who was always so worried about you anyway. A suggestion here, a fabricated story there. Sarah seems so forgetful. Sarah was slurring her words last night. "I think I found a bottle hidden in the laundry room." They all wanted to believe it. It's so much easier to believe in your weakness than in my strength. Every word was a nail in my coffin, a coffin she had been building for me since I said, "I do." She detailed her campaign with a chilling pride. How she'd swapped my prenatal vitamins for something that made me nauseous. How she'd accidentally deleted important work emails, making me look incompetent. How she'd told David I was having an affair with my AA sponsor, a kind 60-year-old man who was like a father to me. She had been systematically dismantling my life, my sanity, my credibility, brick by brick, and I had been too lost in the fog of her creation to see the demolition happening around me. My response was pure animal instinct. I clutched Leo so tightly he stirred, a small whimper escaping his lips. My entire world had been a lie, curated by this woman. My husband, the man I loved, was either her accomplice or a fool of such epic proportions that the distinction hardly mattered. The despair was a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. I felt the floor drop out from under me, the familiar, terrifying pull of rock bottom. For a second, a fleeting, insane moment, I almost believed her. Maybe she was right. Maybe I was broken. Maybe letting go was the only way to stop the pain. The urge to just sign the papers, to disappear into the quiet facility she'd chosen for me, was a siren's call. But then I looked down at my son, his tiny, perfect face, his little hand curled around my finger, and the rage returned, a cleansing fire. It burned away the despair, the self-doubt, the poison she had dripped into my soul. She would not have him. I would die before I let her have him. I feigned collapse, letting my head fall back against the chair, my eyes fluttering shut. I let out a soft, defeated sob. "You're right," I choked out. I can't do this anymore. You win." Her victory was complete. She leaned back, a satisfied sigh escaping her lips. "I knew you'd see reason, dear. It's so much better this way. Now just sign the papers. David will bring the pen." She stood up, smoothing her skirt, the perfect picture of composed, benevolent control. She was about to turn, to call for her son, to deliver the final blow, and that's when the door flew open. It wasn't David. It was my Uncle Mark. He stood there, his face a mask of thunderous fury. He was a big man, a former prosecutor who had seen the worst of humanity, but I had never seen this look on his face. It was pure, unadulterated rage. He had heard it all. He had been standing outside the nursery door for the last 10 minutes, listening to every word of Eleanor's monstrous confession. "Get away from her," he growled, his voice a low rumble that shook the room. Eleanor froze, her face paling, the smug satisfaction instantly replaced by a flash of panic. David appeared behind Mark, his face a mess of confusion and dawning horror. He had clearly heard only the end, the confrontation, not the confession. "Mark, what's going on? Mom?" Mark ignored him. He walked straight to me, his eyes softening for a moment as he looked at me and Leo, then hardening again as he turned back to Eleanor. "Every word, you vile creature. I heard every single word." He pulled out his own phone. "And I recorded it too, just in case hers wasn't working." He had seen my phone in the blanket when he'd first arrived. He knew. My quiet, brilliant uncle had understood immediately. The intervention was was swift and brutal. Eleanor tried to bluster, to deny, to revert to her role as the concerned matriarch. "Mark, she's not well. She's delusional. You can't believe a word she says." "Shut up, Eleanor," Mark said, his voice cutting through her lies like a surgeon's scalpel. He turned to David. "Your mother just confessed to systematically drugging your wife for months to make her appear unstable so she could steal your son. Call the police, now." David stood there, paralyzed, looking from his mother's panicked face to my tear-streaked one. The choice was laid bare before him, and in that moment of hesitation, he made it. He chose his mother. "Mom, what is she talking about? Sarah, what lies have you been telling?" Mark didn't wait for David's cowardice to play out. He dialed 911 himself. "Yes, I need officers at 14 Elm Street immediately. I'm reporting an assault and an attempted kidnapping." He read the address calmly, his lawyer's mind already taking over, shifting from rage to strategy. The police arrived within minutes. The christening guests, just beginning to arrive, were met with the sight of 2 squad cars in the driveway. Eleanor was escorted out of my home protesting her innocence, casting herself as the victim of her hysterical, drug-addled daughter-in-law. But the damage was done. The war had begun. The immediate aftermath was a blur of chaos and stark, terrifying clarity. The police took my statement, a rambling, tearful account punctuated by Uncle Mark's calm, precise interjections. They took my phone with the recording and the dregs of the tea I had saved from that morning. They took the file folder Eleanor had brought. David tried to intervene, to smooth things over, but Mark shut him down with a look that could curdle milk. "You need to decide right now if you are a husband or just a son," Mark told him quietly but firmly. "And then you need to hire a lawyer." David retreated, his face pale and slack with shock, his world crumbling around him. He left with the police to give his own statement, a man caught between 2 warring forces, and I knew with a certainty that ached in my bones that he would not choose me. That night, after the police had left and the last of the bewildered christening guests had been sent away, Mark sat with me in the silent, sterile kitchen. He had made me eat a piece of toast that tasted like cardboard and drink a glass of water. He had called my sponsor, who was on her way over. He was a whirlwind of calm, efficient action. "Okay," he said, pulling a legal pad from his briefcase. "This is what happens next. First thing tomorrow, we are filing for an emergency protective order. Eleanor is not to come within 500 feet of you or Leo. Second, I am calling Detective Miller. She's the best, a bulldog. She specializes in domestic cases like this. Third, you are going to the hospital to get a full toxicology screening. We need blood and hair samples. We need to document everything." Thus began the meticulous, soul-crushing process of engaging the system. My first consultation was not with just one professional, but a triage team Mark assembled. Detective Miller was a woman in her 50s with tired eyes that missed nothing. She listened to my story without expression, her pen scratching across her notepad. She was skeptical, I could tell. She had seen 1,000 bitter custody battles. But when she listened to the audio recording from my phone, her expression changed. A hard, angry line formed around her mouth. "Mr. Blackwood," she said to David when he returned from the station, "your mother is in a great deal of trouble." Next was the therapist, a woman named Dr. Anya Sharma, who specialized in trauma and addiction recovery. Mark had vetted her personally. In her quiet, sunlit office, I finally allowed myself to fall apart. I cried for the last year of my life, for the gaslighting I had endured, for the love I thought I had with my husband, now revealed as a fragile, hollow thing. She didn't offer platitudes. She offered tools, grounding techniques, breathing exercises, a framework for understanding the psychology of narcissistic abuse. "Your recovery is now your most important weapon," she told me. "Your sobriety is your shield. Eleanor tried to use your past against you. We are going to turn it into your greatest strength." The second phase was the painstaking compilation of evidence. It became my full-time job, my obsession. Mark had me create a detailed timeline going back 2 years. Every visit from Eleanor, every strange comment, every sudden bout of illness I had experienced. I cross-referenced the timeline with my journals, my calendars, my text messages. A horrifying pattern emerged. My worst days, the days I felt I was losing my grip on reality, all coincided with her visits, with her gifts of special teas, homemade soups, and calming aromatherapy oils. We documented everything. I saved every text message, every simpering, manipulative voicemail. "Darling, just calling to see how you are. You sounded so down yesterday. Are you sure you're taking care of yourself?" I printed out emails from David where he would parrot her concerns. "Sarah, my mom told me you missed another doctor's appointment. You have to take this seriously." Each document was a small piece of the mosaic of her abuse, and assembling it was like reliving the trauma over and and over again. But with each piece of paper I filed away in the evidence binder, I felt a sliver of my power returning. I was no longer a confused victim. I was an investigator building a case against my own tormentor. Throughout this period, my personal support network became my lifeline. My sponsor, Maria, came over every day. We didn't always talk about Eleanor. Sometimes we just sat in silence, or played with Leo, or went for a walk. Her presence was a quiet reminder that I was not alone, that sobriety was a path I had chosen and fought for, and that I could fight for this too. My parents, who lived across the country, were horrified and heartbroken. They had always been wary of Eleanor's polished cruelty. They flew in and took turns staying with me, creating a physical barrier against the world. And there was Mark, my uncle, my lawyer, my avenger. He worked tirelessly, his anger a controlled, focused energy that fueled the entire investigation. He was my rock, the one person who had never once doubted me, even when I had doubted myself. Building this fortress of support was the only thing that kept me from crumbling under the weight of it all. Eleanor, of course, did not go quietly. She hired a team of lawyers from the most expensive firm in the city, sharks in $1,000 suits. And then the retaliation began. It was a character assassination of the highest order. The first salvo was a motion to dismiss my request for a protective order. It was accompanied by a sworn affidavit from Eleanor, a work of fiction so audacious it left me breathless. In her telling, I was a mentally unstable, relapsed alcoholic who had concocted this elaborate fantasy to punish her and David for trying to stage an intervention. They dug into my past with a vicious glee. They subpoenaed my medical records from my teenage years, dredging up a bout of depression after my parents' divorce. They found the records from my time in rehab, twisting my honest admissions in group therapy into evidence of a pathological inability to tell the truth. They attached a photograph of me from a college party, a stupid, drunken picture, and presented it as proof of my ongoing, unmanageable alcoholism. Their filings painted me as a manipulative, vindictive, and, most importantly, an unfit mother. I read the documents, and for a terrifying moment, I saw the woman they described. The doubt crept back in. Was I crazy? Did I imagine it all? It was her gaslighting, amplified by the cold, formal language of the law. Then came the coercion, a two-pronged attack on my finances and my emotions. David, now fully under his mother's control, became her primary weapon. He would call me, his voice a pathetic blend of pleading and threatening. "Sarah, just stop this," he'd beg. "My mother is a good person. She was just trying to help. You're tearing this family apart." When pleading didn't work, he turned to bribery. "Look, we can make this all go away. I'll give you the house, a generous settlement, full custody even. Just sign a non-disclosure agreement and retract the statement you gave to the police." The offer was tempting. A clean break, an escape, but I knew what it was. It was hush money. It was the price of my silence, and it was a price I was no longer willing to pay. When I refused, the threats began. "You don't know what you're up against, Sarah. My mother is a powerful woman. She has friends, judges. You will lose. You will lose everything, and you will lose Leo. She will make sure of it." The calls were relentless. His sisters, who had once been like my own, joined the chorus. They left me voicemails dripping with venom, calling me a gold digger, a liar, a home wrecker. They were enablers, antagonists by proxy, mobilized by Eleanor to apply pressure from all sides. I felt like I was under siege. I changed my number. Mark began handling all communication with David's lawyer, but the psychological toll was immense. They were trying to isolate me, to break me down, to make me believe that I was the one who was truly alone. It was the darkest point, a true rock-bottom crisis where giving up felt like the only path to peace. I almost succumbed. I sat with the settlement offer on my table for an entire night, the pen in my hand, ready to sign my name and end the war. But then Leo woke up crying, and I went to him, and holding him in my arms, I knew I couldn't. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was his. The investigative process was a slow, grinding machine, and I was just one small cog within it. Detective Miller was methodical, patient, and utterly unimpressed by the Blackwood family name or their high-priced lawyers. The first procedural step was executing the search warrant on Eleanor's home. I wasn't there, but Miller described it to me later. Eleanor had been the picture of offended dignity, offering the officers tea while they searched her meticulously clean, oppressively silent house. She thought she was untouchable. She believed she had hidden her tracks perfectly. The wheels of justice turned with agonizing slowness. There were endless requests for records, pre-trial motions filed by Eleanor's team to suppress evidence, and depositions that felt like psychological warfare. I had to sit in a sterile conference room for 8 hours, while her lead attorney, a man named Peterson with cold, dead eyes, questioned me about every aspect of my life. He twisted my words, questioned my memory, and implied that my history of alcoholism made me an inherently unreliable narrator. "Mrs. Blackwood," he said, using my married name like a weapon, "isn't it true that alcoholics are prone to blackouts, to memory loss, to confabulation?" I held on to the grounding techniques Dr. Sharma had taught me, planting my feet firmly on the floor, focusing on my breath, and answering each question with a calm, steady voice. "My name is Sarah Collins," I said, my voice not wavering, "and I have been sober for 5 years. I do not have blackouts. I remember everything." Then came the breakthroughs, the key discoveries that began to turn the tide. The first was the toxicology report from my hair sample. Mark and I sat in his office as he read the email from the lab. "They found it, Sarah," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Significant sustained levels of Zopiclone, a powerful sedative. It's not something you've ever been prescribed. It matches the residue found in the teacup from the nursery. It was the first piece of hard physical evidence." I wasn't crazy. I hadn't imagined it. I cried with a relief so profound it felt like a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. The second breakthrough came from Detective Miller. The search of Eleanor's house had initially seemed fruitless, but a junior detective, a young woman with fresh eyes, had noticed something odd. The decorative tea caddy on the mantelpiece, the one labeled Earl Grey, felt too heavy. Inside, beneath a layer of loose-leaf tea, they found a plastic baggie containing hundreds of crushed white pills. They were Zopiclone, and in Eleanor's bedside table, tucked inside a leather-bound copy of The Art of War, they found her journals. They weren't just diaries, they were battle plans, page after page of obsessive, hateful entries about me. "The parasite is weakening. David is finally seeing the truth. Soon the boy will be safe. Soon he will be mine." It was a direct window into the mind of a malignant narcissist, and it was irrefutable. The final crucial piece of evidence was my phone recording. Eleanor's lawyers fought tooth and nail to have it thrown out, claiming it was an illegal recording, a violation of her privacy. This led to one of the most difficult strategic decisions of the case. The prosecutor, a sharp, ambitious woman named Jessica Ryan, advised us that the recording's admissibility was a 50-50 shot in a pretrial motion. If we lost, the jury would never hear it. However, if I testified about the conversation and Eleanor took the stand to deny it, the recording could then be introduced as rebuttal evidence to impeach her testimony. It was a huge gamble. It relied on Eleanor's arrogance, on her believing she could lie her way out of it on the stand. "She'll do it," I told Mark and Jessica. "She's a narcissist. She believes she's smarter than everyone else in the room. She won't be able to resist the opportunity to perform for a jury." It was a risk, but we decided to take it. We would hold the recording back, a trump card hidden up our sleeve, and build the rest of the case around it. We were no longer just defending. We were setting a trap. The day of the trial arrived on a cold, gray morning in October. Walking into the courthouse felt like walking into an arena. The air was thick with tension. Eleanor was already there, seated at the defense table, looking elegant and composed in a cream-colored suit. She looked like a grieving grandmother, a pillar of the community, not a poisoner. She met my eyes across the courtroom, and a small, confident smile played on her lips. She thought she was going to win. David was there too, sitting in the back row, a ghost at the feast, his face drawn and haggard. He wouldn't look at me. My testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. When Jessica Ryan called my name, my heart hammered against my ribs. I walked to the witness stand, my legs feeling like they were made of lead. I avoided looking at Eleanor, focusing instead on a small crack in the plaster on the back wall, just as Dr. Sharma had advised. "Find a neutral spot. Breathe. Plant your feet." Jessica took me through the story methodically, from the day I met David to the day of the christening. My voice was shaky at first, but as I spoke, as I recounted the years of subtle abuse, the escalating cruelty, the fog of the drugs, a strange calm settled over me. I was simply telling the truth. It was my story, and no one could take it away from me anymore. Then came the cross-examination. Peterson, Eleanor's lawyer, approached the stand like a wolf circling its prey. For 3 hours, he subjected me to a brutal, relentless assault on my character, my memory, and my sanity. He brought up my rehab records, reading aloud my most vulnerable confessions. "Mrs. Collins, you admit here to being a liar and a manipulator during your active addiction. How can this jury be sure you are not lying and manipulating them right now?" He twisted my postpartum anxiety into psychosis. "Isn't it true you had thoughts of harming yourself and your child?" I held on, answering each question as calmly as I could. "I had intrusive thoughts, which are a common symptom of postpartum anxiety. I never had any intention of harming anyone. I sought help for it." He sneered, he postured, he tried to rattle me, but I held my ground. I had been to hell and back, a lawyer in a fancy fancy suit was not going to break me. After my testimony, the prosecution began to methodically present its evidence. Detective Miller took the stand and described the search of Eleanor's house, her testimony culminating in the presentation of the tea caddy full of crushed pills and the hateful journals. An evidence technician projected pages from the journals onto a large screen for the jury to see. The courtroom was silent as Eleanor's own words, full of venom and calculation, filled the space. The cow is too stupid to realize she's being sedated. She thinks it's maternal fatigue. Perfect. Next, the toxicologist, a dry academic man, explained the science of the hair sample analysis, showing a graph that detailed months of sustained, non-prescribed sedative exposure. The prosecutor then called my sponsor, Maria, who spoke with quiet dignity about my 5 years of sobriety, my commitment to the program, and my character. But the most dramatic moment came when the defense presented its case. As we had gambled, Eleanor took the stand. She was a consummate actress. She cried, dabbing her eyes with a silk handkerchief, as she described her love for me, her fears for my health, her desperate attempts to save me from myself. She denied everything, painting herself as the tragic victim of a cruel and elaborate lie. During his cross-examination of Eleanor, the prosecutor, following our strategy, let her dig her own grave. He asked her point blank, "Mrs. Blackwood, did you, on the morning of the christening, confess to your daughter-in-law that you had been drugging her?" Eleanor looked at the jury, her eyes wide with manufactured innocence. "Absolutely not," she said, her voice dripping with sincerity. "That is a monstrous fabrication." And that was the moment. The prosecutor turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the prosecution would like to introduce rebuttal evidence to impeach the witness's testimony. People's Exhibit 42, an audio recording of the conversation in question." Peterson jumped to his feet, objecting furiously, but the judge, his face grim, overruled him. The trap had been sprung. They played the recording, my voice, weak and trembling, and then Eleanor's, clear as a bell, smug and triumphant, confessing to everything. "So clever, wasn't it? It was so easy to convince everyone you were falling apart. I am saving him from you." A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Jurors stared at Eleanor, their faces masks of shock and disgust. Her composure finally cracked. The color drained from her face, her mask of grieving grandmother replaced by the slack-jawed horror of a predator caught in the light. The recording ended, and the silence that followed was absolute. She was finished. The verdict came back after only 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty of assault with a deadly weapon, the judge agreed that using a powerful sedative as a poison qualified. Guilty of attempted kidnapping. Guilty of stalking. They acquitted her on a few lesser charges, things the prosecution couldn't prove beyond a reasonable doubt, like the specific intent behind swapping my vitamins years earlier. It was a victory, a resounding one. The sentencing happened a month later. The judge spoke of the chilling and predatory nature of her crimes, the profound violation of trust. He sentenced her to 10 years in state prison. 10 years. It sounded like a long time. But with parole, Mark explained, she would likely be out in 7. 7 years for trying to steal my life, my sanity, and my child. It was justice, but it felt incomplete. It was a bittersweet verdict. I felt a surge of relief, of vindication, but it was quickly followed by a hollow ache. No prison sentence could give me back that first year of my son's life. No verdict could erase the trauma, the betrayal, the memory of my husband's weakness. The legal system had done its job, but the wound was too deep for a courtroom to heal. I had won the war, but the scars would be with me forever. In the months that followed the trial, I began the long, slow process of grappling with that imperfect justice. In my sessions with Dr. Sharma, I wrestled with the feeling that Eleanor's sentence wasn't enough. I wanted her to feel the despair I had felt. I wanted her to lose everything, the way I almost had. The legal system is about accountability, not vengeance, Dr. Sharma reminded me gently. The verdict holds her accountable for her actions. Your healing, however, is not the court's responsibility. It's yours. She was right. I had to learn to separate the legal outcome from my personal recovery. Justice for me wouldn't be found in the length of her prison sentence. It would be found in the quality of my own life, a life lived freely and fully, far from her shadow. Rebuilding that life was a practical, step-by-step process. The divorce from David was finalized quickly and quietly. He didn't fight me on anything. He gave me the house, full custody of Leo, and a generous child support agreement. It wasn't kindness, it was guilt. I saw him one last time at the lawyer's office to sign the final papers. He looked broken, a man hollowed out by his own cowardice. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he whispered as he left. "I know," I said, and I did. I knew he was sorry, but I also knew it didn't matter anymore. Sorry couldn't fix what he had allowed to happen. I sold the house, that beautiful home that had become my prison, and used the money to move. move. I bought a small, unassuming townhouse in a quiet suburb 2 hours away, just one town over from Uncle Mark and his family. I went back to school online, enrolling in a paralegal program. The long hours I had spent with Mark, compiling evidence and preparing for the trial, had ignited something in me. I wanted to help others navigate the labyrinthine legal system. I wanted to be the person I had so desperately needed, an advocate for victims of domestic abuse. It gave me a sense of purpose, a way to transform my pain into something useful. I continued my therapy, continued going to my AA meetings, and focused on the simple, daily rhythms of raising my son. There were good days and bad days. Sometimes a scent or a sound would trigger a flashback, and the panic would rise in my throat. But now I had the tools to manage it. I could breathe through it. I could call my sponsor. I could hold my son and ground myself in the solid, joyful reality of our new life. The most important step in my new beginning was establishing permanent, non-negotiable boundaries. I obtained a lifetime restraining order against Eleanor. The day she is released from prison, it will still be in effect. She can never contact me or Leo. She can never come near our home, our school, or our lives. It is a wall of paper and law that I have built around my family. I also made the painful but necessary decision to sever all ties with David's family. Any relative who had called me, harassed me, or stood by and enabled Eleanor's abuse was cut out of my life completely. It felt like an amputation, cutting away a part of myself that had been there for years. But it was the only way to ensure the poison could never seep back in. My life was now a fortress, and I was its vigilant guard. The story ends not with a bang, but with a quiet evening. It's 2 years after the trial. Leo is a rambunctious toddler now, building a wobbly tower of blocks on the living room floor of our small, safe home. The setting sun streams through the window, catching the dust motes dancing in the air. I am on the couch, a textbook on tort law open in my lap, but I'm not reading. I'm watching my son. He looks up at me and grins, a flash of bright, new teeth, and my heart aches with a love so fierce it's almost painful. The scars are still there, pale, silvery lines on my soul. They always will be, but they no longer hurt. They are just a part of me, a reminder of the battle I fought and the victory I won. This quiet, ordinary moment, this is the justice I was fighting for. This is the peace I reclaim. The tower of blocks comes crashing down, and Leo laughs, a pure, delighted sound that fills the room. And I laugh with him. We are here. We are safe. We are free.